Okay, let's lead our lives, Alex.
Wow, that sounds like a big job.
So, we're heading into a new series called Lead Your Life.
Hmm.
And there's a reason we decided to head into this series. And I thought it would be helpful for us to just really talk to our listeners about why. Why did we choose this topic?
Hmm. Well, I can speak for me, and then you can speak for you.
Mhm.
Um, I am a person who tends to respond to life as it comes at me. And then whole years go by, and I realize, okay, maybe if I'd been a little more intentional in this area, I would be further along in where I want to go. And if we're really peeling back the layers, then the question becomes, okay, where do I want to go? Oh, wait, I don't actually know. Or I'm too afraid to say,
Mm,
because then what if it doesn't happen? Like
mhm,
that's the layer beyond the layer beyond the layer, right? The
mm,
the self-protection from disappointment. That if I don't say where I want to go, then it's okay because then I'm well, so then we know what happens. You wander aimlessly. And I don't mean to say that I wander aimlessly through my days because I've got a lot to do and a lot of people to take care of. And what's right in front of me is usually very clear what needs to happen. Those dishes need to be cleaned. This email needs to be returned. And I'm responding constantly to the immediate needs. So when I think about how do I want to change? How do I want to be a better steward of the influence that God has given me? How do I want to be a more effective world changer for good right where I am? I need to add some intention into my life. So
mm.
that's why this idea of leading your life resonated with me. And I do also want to say we're talking about it within the context of faith. So we are trusting each other to be also led by the Holy Spirit.
Mm.
That this isn't just this is my 5-point goal plan, which I'm terrible at. So we all know I'm not that person. But for some people who might be using this tagline, lead your life, it might be, this is where I want to go. And so I'm headed in that direction. We are faithfully asking God, where do we want to be headed and what's good for us and what's within the confines of your glory, Lord? And how can I best steward my influence? And through prayerful consideration, we are leading our lives.
Mhm. Yeah,
Why did it resonate with you, this idea?
because of intentionality. I I just really know from I knew before I became a life coach how much intentionality matters, but after doing all of the methodology work that I've done and the classes and the education around intentionality and growth, that it just matters that we don't just grow by default. That actually is not what happens. We only grow when we're intentional about it. And that is just a truth. I mean, there's a quote by Eleanor Roosevelt that I really like. And it says, one's philosophy is not best expressed in words. It is expressed in the choices one makes. In the long run, we shape our lives and we shape ourselves. So what that means is that while we're making our choices, we're going along our life and making our choices, we're actually shaping ourselves through those choices. And that's interesting. It's just an
Mm-hmm.
interesting way to look at it, that we make our choices, but in essence, our choices make us. And so I think the question is, how are we being formed? And are we happy with how we're being formed? Are we going in the direction that we want to go? And part of part of it is knowing ourselves. So
Mm-hmm.
knowing where we are, we have to be that you are here on the map, right? So we have to actually take the time to know ourselves and evaluate where we are. And then we have to evaluate where we want to go, which is asking the deeper question that you just got to of, am I courageous enough to even name this?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is a really good point, is, am I willing to even ask myself, what do I want?
Mm-hmm.
And, through prayer and through discernment, walking through that process, we don't even ask that question. We don't even take the time to ask the question. So it's knowing yourself, knowing what you actually want. Like I can say, okay, I've got, Lord willing, I've got so many years left on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
What do I want those to look like? And one of the ways I like to ask that is, what story do I want to tell with my life in this season? Or is there a better story that I want to tell with my life in this season? And it's just a good question. And then the third component is for us to actually do it. And that's actually the hardest because it's really easy to talk about these things that we might want to do, but how are we changing our life to actually do them? So when it comes to this topic of lead your life, then why it resonates with me is because it's hard and it takes an intentional effort to lead our lives in the direction that we want to go and not just respond to our life. Because we could literally, I could spend every day just responding to everything around me and to emails and to people's needs. And I could just respond, but then never really go in the direction that God is calling me to go. And so, because that takes action, that takes saying no to things. It takes actually discerning, how should I spend my time? How should I be saying yes to that? Or should I say no to that? There's just so many layers to it, but in essence, leading our lives requires the time on the upfront, the front end, to know actually how we want to lead our lives. And so that's part of why we're doing this series, because let's look at different areas of our lives, kind of these different pieces of the pie. One of the things I do is that life wheel, where you look at different parts of your life. And we're looking at different parts of the life wheel in this series. And we're saying, how are we doing here? And are we where we want to be? And where do we want to go?
Yeah. And I also want to say we're doing it within the context of real life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we know women don't have 8 hours to just have this contemplative time, that this is within the context of, you do have responsibilities and there are emergencies that you need to respond to. And yet you can carve out 20 minutes. We're going to believe that for you every day. It gets back to Sasha Shilkut's episode that we had in December of, if you don't start there with yourself, then everything else is just kind of that hamster wheel. So we're trying to help ourselves, help each other get off the hamster wheel a little bit. Some of us need a little more of a push than others, because I think, Krista, you're somebody who doesn't mind change, whereas I probably mind change more. So the thought of, like, what am I going to do to change my life? It was interesting that you said the hardest part is the doing. I would say for me, the hardest part is the saying out loud what I want. Because then I've admitted to the world that I want something. And then I've already thought about all the steps. Like, I know what needs to happen, but it's the saying yes and then committing to it. And maybe the committing to it's the doing part, but okay. And I will say, in the last 2 months, I've had 3 dear people to me, women who were about 10 to 15 years older than me, die from cancer. Well, pass into heaven, I should say. And that finality of life is really in my face right now in a serious way. So it's real. We only have so many years left, and we don't know how many years we have. From all three of them, they should have, by the world's standards, lived longer. And yet they all knew that this is God's timeline. And it was interesting to watch them all surrender to that, but that's a whole nother conversation. But just to say, life doesn't last forever. And so intentionality about using the time we have.
Okay, Alex, we are headed into a new series called Lead Your Life. It's exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I want to lead my life. I don't know how, which is why we're doing this, so I can figure this out. You're better at this than I am.
Well, I think what's great about this series is that at any point in life, we can lead our lives differently. We can say, oh, wow, I want to do better in this area. Oh, I want to do this in the next 1 to 5 years. And we can go in a different direction. That's so hopeful to me.
Yeah, it is hopeful. And the truth is, it's easier for some people to kind of make that switch than to others. So let's just use us as an example, a little case study of
exactly
different approaches.
Best case.
Krista, that comes pretty naturally to you to set goals. Would you say you're a goal setter?
I'm a goal setter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I am not a goal setter. And the reason I'm not a goal setter is because what if I don't achieve those goals? Then I'm going to be really sad or embarrassed or disappointed or devastated. You know, you choose from that menu of options. And so things like saying what I want, like leading your life means you know where you're wanting to go. Because if you're leading someone or something somewhere, you know where you're wanting to go. And I get really overwhelmed in that because I get overwhelmed in saying what I want. And so what I end up doing is staying busy with the immediate, because we all have a lot of immediate that can keep us busy. And then I can let whole years go by and be like, okay, well, nothing changed in that area. And funny enough, it's because I didn't do anything different in that area. I just let it continue. So I am trying to be better about this. I'm trying to practice the agency that God has given me to make changes. And I also want to recognize that for some people, even hearing that is hard because circumstances feel so overwhelming. So we're going to be talking about leading our lives within the context of our actual lives. So I just want people to know that if you're feeling already overwhelmed, like, oh no, I'm turning this off, I can't set goals, or I can't make a change in an area, to trust us enough to stick with us for a little bit, because this is the gentle approach. It's the small bite-sized approach. It's the take that next step approach, not the take the huge leap approach. So I just want to encourage my fellow women who maybe get a little bit overwhelmed at the idea of considering where you want to go and making a plan, that it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, and it's the small win concept that we're going for here, which is it works. The small wins work. And I want people to hear that actually this is why checklists work, because we actually get these small hits of dopamine when we have small wins, and even checking something off of a list is a small win. And that encourages us. It actually creates motivation in us to do other things. So we're just going for the small wins. And I like looking at it that way because it feels doable.
Right. Okay.
You really hit on something that I think is important, and that is that we all respond differently to change. And, as someone who is a DISC coach, and the DISC is just a scientific measure of communication and behavior, but there's some types that are very resistant to change, and some types that pivot super easily, and change is fun. In fact, it's exciting to change. And so I think that's a good point. And it's important for us to recognize that and to say, yeah, everyone's on a spectrum here. And yet for all of us, we get to decide because we have choice and agency in our lives. And sometimes we don't think that, but we do, how we want to move forward in this next season of life. And maybe that next season is a year. Maybe it's the next 5 years. Maybe it's 10 years, but we get to choose how we want to move forward. And that could be where we're bringing lots of different categories to this series. So we'll be talking about different aspects. So if you look at it like a pie, like I use a life wheel in coaching, and we evaluate all these different pieces of life. And some of them are mental, some are physical, some are around relationships, some are around our bodies, but we're looking at kind of this whole pie. So we're going to be looking and breaking down these different areas in this series. And we get to ask the question, where do I want to go in this area? And then how do I get there?
Okay. Well, I think that's great. So sisters, know there's a place for you. And, I've had 3 women in the last few months who have died of cancer, who by the world's terms were young. And the finality of life is kind of facing me. I'd say maybe midlife crisis wouldn't be too off from what I'm having for lots of reasons.
Uh-huh.
That's part of why we're talking about this, right? Because
Yeah.
it's an opportunity for shifting and pivoting and changing. But just the finality of life is real. And so that's why this topic has really felt like, yeah, let's dig into it. Let's do it together, because it's a lot less scary to talk about together.
So what do you like? How does lead your life? How does this specifically then apply to midlife? I mean, why should we? Haven't we already been doing life? So why are
Mhm.
we taking this approach?
Yeah. So why does life feel so different these days? Jeez. Well, I am finding from my own experiences, and I think from observing others in my same stage of life, that there are so many changes happening that are out of our control. And we have maybe been successful managing life in lots of different areas on that pie. Maybe we've been really doing a great job on all these slices of the pie, and all of a sudden somebody rearranged the slices or cut a slice in half or something, that it is out of our control, because so many things, our parents above us, our kids below us, the world around us is changing. And so we have opportunities to respond, and we can either hold on to the old ways that perhaps don't work anymore, or we can be intentional. And that's what we're talking about. What do you think? Why is this topic relevant right now for you at your stage of midlife?
If I go big picture on it, it's because I want this next season of my life to count. I see a lot of people that around midlife, they let's just call it they kind of go in these different directions, and they're not always the healthiest directions to go, or they kind of check out and just say, all right, I'm just golfing the rest of my years. You know what I'm saying? Like they just all leisure. So it's like either kind of checking out, and maybe it's using substances more, or kind of, turning to other things, or it's kind of just going like completely to, I'm just going to live out the rest of my days just like having fun and doing, these leisurely activities. Again, we like golf in our family. There's nothing wrong with golf, but like I want my years to count. I want to have purpose in this next season. And just because my purpose is winding down in a different way that I had in that first season, I really believe that God opens up new purpose in every season of our lives. And so for me, this feels really important because I want to be a vessel that's used. And I don't want to just be rusty in a corner. I want to actually make a difference in the world. Again, world changer for good, right where we are, not in these huge ways, but I want to have purpose in my days and with what I'm doing. And I also know just from, I've known this intuitively my whole life, but I really know it now. around all the education I've had with life coaching, and that is that growth doesn't just happen. We can't just live and expect to grow, or we can't just experience life and expect to grow, because it's not actually lived experience that makes you wiser. It's reflective life experience. You actually have to reflect on your life to do something differently. You have to intentionally lean into growth in order to grow, because there is something called the law of inertia. And the law of inertia is really simple. And it says that inertia is the idea that an object will continue its current motion until some force causes its speed or direction to change. So what that means is that we're just going to keep going in our same direction, doing the same thing. Or maybe it's kind of a new thing because our life has changed, like you were referring to. I mean, midlife throws you into all sorts of new circumstances.
Change agents happen.
And yet we can just keep doing life the way we have always done it. Or we can be that thing in the law of inertia that disrupts the path and that sends us on a new trajectory. And that's what I want.
So in your own life, where are the hard spots right now? And where are the places where you think, oh, I think I am doing this. I'm leading my life well.
Yeah. And I'll start with the positive, because it's a coaching tip, because actually that puts us
fun.
That puts us in a positive frame of mind.
Yeah.
So I feel really excited about coaching and about both life coaching, executive coaching, leadership coaching. I mean, group coaching, all coaching. I just love it. I have found a spot that it feels really exciting. It feels purposeful. It feels deeply helpful to people. And I get so much joy out of watching people come to new insights. And it gives me a new purpose to be coming alongside of people on their journeys, whether that's professionally or personally. And so that feels really exciting, just that God is opening up because I do have more time, because my kids are getting older, that it's opening up. I mean, for the first time, I can like really run professionally in this area, because we still have one at home. So I'm still running to things, but it's not having 4 kids at home. And so that's giving me new opportunities. And so that's a real positive about this season of life for me. And then I would also say that Eric and I were getting lots of time together because we are spending more time. And that's a really good thing for us, is to be kind of creating this new normal where we don't have as many kids always in the house. So it's just like we'll look at each other and be like, all right, it's just you and me again tonight, babe. So that's good. And then we actually have more space, and we're hoping to do this more. In fact, I talked about it on our Things We Love episode, but I want to travel more and I want to have more experiences. And so I feel like that's a really fun, that's going well right now. And then as far as the hard, one of the hards for me is just the constant fight against the changes happening in my body, regardless of discipline, regardless of nutrition, regardless of how I work out. Just it's hormones, it is genetics, it's just all there. And it's a struggle. It is a struggle. And I have to really be careful. And this gets into my second one. I have to really be careful of the limiting beliefs that I tell myself. So limiting belief is a coaching term. And what that means, I call it, or I just say, call out the liar, because we often are telling ourselves lies about things that we don't feel good about. And we don't even know we're doing it. We're actually doing it subconsciously half the time. But I have to really be careful what narratives are playing in my head around that, and what I'm telling myself about myself. And so I think one of the things I'm really working on is creating powerful statements that come up against those lies and say a truth over some of those lies. And a lot of it has to do around identity. A lot of it has to do around kind of who I am in Christ and what is really what really matters and who I want to be around aging. I mean, that's huge. Who do I want to be? Do I want to be that woman who's always fighting aging? No, I don't want to be that person. I want to be someone who grows more beautiful with age because of what's happening inside of me. And if I want that, then I have to know what I'm telling myself about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me of when I wake up at 3 a.m, which I do. The more stressed I am, the more likely it is that I wake up at 3 a.m. and my thoughts start going. And what I've started doing the last few months is praying and saying, okay, Jesus, where are you in this? Lie down with me, next to me in my bed. I picture him lying with me. And I'm like, I'm going to just let you take care of me right now. And it's such a relaxing, but it kind of brings it back to, this is not of you, and I need more of you in my life. So even if you can't come up with those statements, to just say, where is Jesus in this? And I think quickly the Holy Spirit will point back to Jesus, because that's the Holy Spirit's job, is to point to Jesus. And so yeah, I can
I
really
love that.
relate to that.
That's really helpful. And I think at any moment we can do that. The hard thing is sometimes we don't capture the lies, or we're not capturing the worries, or capturing the whatever those thoughts are. We're just letting ourselves run wild with them, and we're not even identifying that in that moment.
Yeah, true.
Okay. What about you?
Guilty. Well, things that are going well, I would say my physical health. And part of it is kind of the same thing as things that are going well in your life. I have the ability to make it a priority right now. I have never exercised this much as I have in my whole life. And so I'm being intentional, and I'm saying, I want this. And because it does have to do with aging, I want to be able to walk around my house and do the things that I want to do. I want to be active. And so I am making exercise a priority in a way I never have before. And my body is responding. So I also recognize I don't have cancer like my friends who, and I have a pretty good gene pool that I'm working with. So I have some things that work in my favor. But I've always had those. But the endorphins I'm getting from working out, and I will say also, I get an immediate gratification when I work out. If I was just working out because I knew it was good for me, which is kind of my old self, I wouldn't do it. And it's just my old self didn't realize how much better I'm going to feel, not just today, but like half an hour after I'm done. And so that immediate gratification is really working in my favor with the discipline, because I'm not a super disciplined person. And then I would also say, like you, I'm spending more time with the people right here, like close to me, my husband, my parents and my in-laws, my kids, people in my home. That's going well because I am intentionally spending a lot of time with them. The flip side of that is I'm not spending a lot of time on friendships or relationships outside of our circle, but I just know that for right now, this is our priority. And I think I'm observing, as far as hard things, that my life might reflect what is common for people our age, it being in kind of a sandwich generation, that I am dealing with the stressors of older kids and the stressors of caring for parents as they age, and the pivots that need to happen in an already very full life. And how do we manage that? And how do we do some long-term planning with a lot of unknowns for both of those groups of people in our lives that we care for? And so, and then how, I had a friend message us a couple of days ago too. How do we, in those unknowns, make plans for ourselves? And so as we lead our lives, how do we do that when there are a lot of people that we love, that we want to care for, and there's a lot of question marks out there? So I don't know. I think that's a stage of life thing, but it's also a how do I lead my life thing in the middle of that.
Yeah, it's good. What about resources? Are there any resources you're finding helpful around this idea of leading your life?
Mm-hmm. One thing that I have used a lot in my work as I work with nonprofit executive directors who are really stressed out people is Steve Cuss's resources. So do you know Steve Cuss? He's a pastor, former pastor,
Mm-hmm.
and he is a coach, and he has this whole leadership anxiety work that he does. And he talks about leadership anxiety in four spaces: in ourselves, between us and another, in a group, and then a group that we're kind of on the outside looking in, and how all of those different dynamics can create different types of stress in us. And he has really practical tools, and he has a community. I don't belong to it, but I know a community you can subscribe to and people that work under him and all of that. But I just find all of the things he puts forward, not only do I resonate with, but the people I work with resonate with. So it's always good when you tell someone, oh, listen to this, and they think, oh, that was super helpful. That has always been the case when I have pointed someone to something he has put out. And his website is my favorite because it's stevecusswords.com is his website. Because I think it started as a blog. And so anyway, he's great. And he's
Hey,
Australian, so his accent's super cool.
yeah, you got to capitalize on your name.
Yeah, right. I mean, if that's your last name, go for it.
Just do it. Yeah. Lean in. Well, okay. I would say for me, a go-to book around growth, and that is, I mean, growth, we could use those interchangeably. Leading your life and growing, they're together. And so the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth by John Maxwell is just a great place to start. It really is. It's a book all about how we grow and in what ways we grow. Um, Another resource, this is so basic, but a calendar, like keep a calendar and actually write things in it. Like, what do I want to do this week to move me forward in this? So I just do one goal every 90 days. And sometimes it doesn't even take 90 days. I don't tackle more than that because I've just learned that focus creates deeper and better results. So I literally write down my goal like every couple days. And so it's always in front of me. And then that way I can ask myself, am I moving toward this today? Am I moving toward this week? And it could be in any category. And I usually have a work goal and a personal goal. So that's just a practical calendar. A proverb every day. That is one way to just like ground yourself as you are looking at leading your life. I mean, Proverbs is so full of wisdom. And so that wisdom can guide us. And The Good Life is a new book that came out around Harvard's longest running study on relationships. I talk about it all the time on here, but it's a really great book to read about how we create happiness in our life. And then I just got to say life coaching, because the reality is that we don't take time to ask ourselves the deeper questions. And that's what a life coach does. And so I personally will never be without a life coach again, because it really helps me to think deeply about my life. And it helps me to think about where is it I want to go? And then how do I get there? So it does work. It really works. Well, Alex, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to pause for a second there, just about life coaching, because our friend Emily Love gave a differentiation when we were together between life coaching and therapy. And I think for a lot of people, it's confusing. And so I think it would be helpful for me, because it was helpful for me to hear this as someone who doesn't live in a life coach world, to understand that therapy is about understanding your past and how it impacts you. And life coaching is about where you want to go from here forward, and kind of that goal setting and strategy around it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, the way I put it is that counseling is when you have an open wound, And life coaching is when there's a scar, it's there, but you're moving beyond it and you're ready to do some things and move forward. So usually counseling is a looking back, and life coaching is a looking forward. So yeah. And it's different than consulting too. Life coaches don't come in and give you lectures and tell you everything that you should be doing with your life. They actually ask you questions and they draw out that inner expert in you that's already there. And they help you to organize your thoughts and to discern where you want to go in your own life. And so that's really different than consulting too.
Okay.
Which is
So,
important to know.
Yeah, I think that's all good distinctions as we throw those words around.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you could offer any advice as we head into this journey of leading our lives, what would you say?
I would say one of the most helpful things that we can do is to name our fears. And I just want to name a few fears. And this is actually straight out of the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth by John Maxwell. He names 5 fears. He says the fear of failure, the fear of trading security for the unknown, the fear of being overextended financially, the fear of what others will say or think, and the fear that success will alienate peers. So one of the things he talks about is that these are some of the reasons we don't grow and we don't lead our lives, because we actually have some of these fears that are really deeply rooted. And so then we almost we self-sabotage, and we don't lean into growth because
Hello, this is like a summary of what I started with. You're just like naming all the fears right there. Yeah.
And so that actually stops us from growing, because we're actually just camped in one of those or multiple of those fears. And so, I mean, one of my recommendations would be to really name whatever fears you're experiencing. We can put those in the show notes too, so you can kind of look at those. And I think asking, what do I really want in the next 5 years, 10 years? Or how about just by next Christmas? If I were going to write a Christmas letter, what would I want to be in it next Christmas? And then how do I do something that's worth writing about in the next 9 months? I mean, simple questions, but we don't ever take time to ask them. And then again, coming back to that question of how do I live a story worth telling? And again, worth telling, like you have to define what that means, but for yourself in God's economy. And how do we live a better story? And that's just a great question to ask. What would you say?
Let's see. For me, I think the steps we are afraid of are often much easier to take than we think. So I get stuck in those fears, all those names, those things you just named. I get stuck in them. And then when I actually take those steps, I realize I made them out to be much worse than they really were. So I've avoided conversations, decisions, just tasks that I've known I need to do, like doing my taxes every year. Like I wait until the last minute because I'm dreading it. And then when I do it, I think, if I forget every year, I feel so much better when I just get it done and it's not that terrible. I just have to do it. So, but that can feel like a really benign thing compared to some other things people are afraid to face. But to encourage us, those of us who tend to live in those fears, to name it and then move forward. And then I would also say, in that same vein, to seize the moment when hard conversations present themselves and you know that it's a conversation you need to have. And this is the best moment to do it, to not let that moment disappear. But to say, okay, this is the time to say that thing that needs to be said. And I've had a few of those in the last few months, and it's just, I've been so happy. Yeah, even when I was having them, because it feels right to have them in that moment. It feels like the right timing, and to say, okay, this is the moment we're going to talk about this and not be afraid of it.
It's good. All right. Well, Lead Your Life. It's the series we're headed into. We're going to be talking about different areas of life that you can make changes in if you want to. And maybe you're doing great in it and it will just affirm where you are. But we're going to be looking at, where do we want to go We're going to be constantly asking the question, what story do I want to tell in this area? All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay. Well, we'll talk soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.